We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Welcome back to Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio American Network. I remain your host, Mark Angelides, and we're joined by Liberty Nation's national security correspondent, Dave Patterson, who's going to join us today and talk with us about what Donald Trump's big grand speech, his inaugural address, and his plans going forward mean for the national security of the United States and the military in particular. Dave, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mark. It's a new day in America.
So they say. It was morning in America, times 2, 3, 4, whatever day you're listening to this on, listeners at home. It really does feel as though there's been a sea change in what the American public believe is possible now. And I think that's very much a case of certain expectations, because the expectations are always set from the top down. And under Joe Biden, it was, well, we can take this money and we can spend this money, and you may get something out of it, which, it's a very touch and go situation. Whereas with Donald Trump, he's talking about putting astronauts on Mars. But specifically, I want to delve into what he said regarding first the armed forces, and then I want to talk about the cartels that I suspect are making plans for retirement in Barbados or somewhere at present. So first, let's do second one first, Dave. I want you to listen to this little excerpt from Trump's inauguration speech.
Under the orders I signed today, we will also be designating the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. And by invoking the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, I will direct our government to use the full and immense power of federal and state law enforcement to eliminate the presence of all foreign gangs and criminal networks, bringing devastating crime to U.S. soil, including our cities and inner cities.
Okay, so what he's saying there then, Dave, is that he will designate the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. What does that mean in practice?
Well, to qualify as a foreign terrorist organization,
You have to be foreign, a terrorist, and an organization.
well, yeah, right. But more specifically, the entity has to be, as you say, foreign. It must engage in terrorist activities. And thirdly, the activity must threaten the security of this nation or its citizens. And I think that in all three of those categories that the cartels definitely qualify.
Okay, yeah, because there's quite a lot of interplay with the other things that he said as well, isn't there, about rounding up these criminal gangs, because a lot of the criminal gangs are tied to organizations outside of the country. MS-13, Tren de Agua, I think it's got, sorry, I don't know the pronunciation of that. But they're tied to places outside of the country, and they're operating with criminal intent and with inspiring terror amongst the American people. And of course, I think Trump, he mentioned in a later speech of the day, he mentioned about the amount of people dying from the fentanyls coming across the border, and that he puts squarely, along with China, the cartels as the irresponsible purveyor, in fact. So what does this mean in terms of what the United States can now do to cartel members, cartel organizations, and infrastructure outside of the United States?
Well, there are actually two points of view on this, and it's, I hate to parse words, but there's some subtleties here. And that former Attorney General William Barr argued against early on designating the cartels as a terrorist organization. On the other hand, more recently in a Wall Street Journal article, he was quite enthusiastic about using the military capabilities in to counter the cartels. So it's unclear as to where where he falls, where the line falls. But he says that, first, a far more aggressive effort inside Mexico has to be started to include significant law enforcement and intelligence presence, as well as select military capabilities. And that's really important, because that means that he favors, perhaps special operations to target specific cartels and to bring them down. He also says that there's the danger that the cartels pose to the U.S. requires that we confront them primarily as a national security threat, not a law enforcement matter. He refers to the cartels as more like ISIS than the mafia. And so that definitely puts them in a category where a military solution would be the right thing to do.
Yeah, the thing that keeps recurring in my thought process here is that with this designation, Trump is essentially seeking to treat these cartel bosses and their upper management levels, I guess, the same as you would Osama bin Laden. And so Osama bin Laden, despite the protections that he was afforded by certain countries after 9/11, he basically spent much of his time living in caves. Now I'm wondering what the cartels might be planning to do in response to this, because they may be the king of their little mountains in Mexico, but compared to surgical strikes by precision U.S. military teams, I don't think they're particularly safe anymore, are they?
Well, they certainly wouldn't be if we put the full weight of our military capability to address the problem. And we've been able to ferret out terrorists for quite some time now and do surgical strikes. Soleimani particularly. I mean, you pick out a car on a road and whack it without causing any damage around it, any collateral damage. I think that's fairly precision. And we have that capability. But here again, there's a certain amount of reluctance, as it should be, in using these kinds of capability indiscriminately, is that you are hitting a terrorist organization inside someone else's country. But quite frankly, Mexico has shown no real enthusiasm for taking on the cartels, and maybe because the cartels are so intertwined with the government and law enforcement within Mexico that it's almost impossible as they would see it. The former President Obrador, when he came to power, he announced he was going to switch his policy about the cartels from hugs, not bullets. Now, that kind of tells you something. And he shut down the counterterrorism or counter-narcotics cooperation with the U.S. But President Trump, put some pressure on, and he started to do some modest, high-profile operations. But it just made the illusion of cooperation. We're not clear as to whether this new president, President Claudia Sheinbaum Pardo, is going to be enthusiastic. She seems to be sensitive to what President Trump says, but time will tell about that.
Yeah, very much so. I've got one further question for you, Dave, while we've still got time. And that's, we've actually seen, talking of the American Armed Forces, we've actually seen an uptick in recruitment this last quarter, haven't we?
Yes, we have. And now it's a little bit early to say that because of Trump, there has been an increase in the numbers in recruitment. But we've got some anecdotal evidence that that's true. A recent article that I did on this phenomenon that I refer to it as many do as the Trump effect. That in Alaska, they interviewed some young men going into the recruiting office, and they clearly said that they are joining the military because they see new leadership and would have not done it before. So, and Pete Hegseth, during his hearing, was very clear that he had seen a surge in recruiting from his perspective once November 5th was over and we had a brighter future for the military.
We'll see how much the Trump effect continues to pervade the military forces. Dave Patterson, thanks ever so much for joining us.
Thank you, Mark. Always good to be with you.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.